Hi everyone, welcome back. Before we cut right to the video, I wanted to share with you guys the agenda for today's interview. As you know, Ktechs has been a long-time channel partner, and I've always been curious about things on the other side of the fence, about the business side of things. And I'm very thankful for him to have this conversation, especially since he's in the middle of moving and things aren't looking the best on camera. If you have trouble getting used to our heavy Singaporean accent, as always, subtitles are included. Disclaimer, this is not a promotional video for Ktechs, but as always, if you are in need of some keyboard supplies, do head on over to make your purchases. Without further ado, let's cut right to the interview. So if a random person were to walk up to you during a keyboard meetup, so you're meeting large groups of people, and there's one or two that comes up to you and ask you, who are you? How would you introduce yourself?
I'm part of Ktechs, so.
Okay.
Welcome to mechanical keyboards, I guess. If that works, yeah.
Okay, so no name, nothing, just
No name, nothing.
Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, then let's talk about your first time in the hobby. I'm sure you have had a number of years before even starting Ktechs. So let's talk about your first mechanical keyboard. What's your experience with it?
The first mechanical keyboard wasn't a good one, which prompted me to look at local shopping spaces to see if there were mechanical keyboards. So I realized that some platforms do not have. Then that's where it started, I guess.
Okay. So what's the first mechanical keyboard that you used?
Can't remember, but the stabilizers were like horrible. Yeah, so there were a lot of mods to do in order to get it to somewhere that I wanted it to be. But at the end of the day, I sold it off.
My first one was the Logitech, the G600 or G500. I forgot the exact number.
Oh! If that's the case, right, then it's the Razer Black Widow. But
Okay,
a lot of people came past it. Yeah. Then there was one of a mechanical keyboard clone. I think it was like $20 or something, or $30 at that time. But it didn't offer the feature set that we are very used to nowadays.
Okay, then why didn't you include that?
No. The capital was too high already. Yeah, that's why I didn't even consider doing that. Yeah, so we started off with very, very small accessories.
You mentioned that your first keyboard was the Razer Black Widow. So now that you are however many number of years into this hobby, how many number of years have you been
Since COVID.
since COVID? So 5 years, right? So after this amount of time, then what do you think of the Razer in today's game? And, yeah.
I think previously I was very drawn to the clicky switches. Yeah,
What's that,
so
sorry?
the clicky switches.
Clicky.
So that was like a very big draw to me at the time. But I guess now I'm more interested in the performance of switches, as in like linears, tactiles, not so much of clickies. But then again, clickies, there's also further depth into just looking at clicky switches. Like there's the melodic, there's the box navies. Like there are still different elements here and there which are more interesting compared to last time where we would just buy Razer because it's clicky.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting, because I'm a strong advocate against using clickies because I really dislike clickies. So as let's say, if I were to come in to your store and say, try to convince me why I should use a clicky.
I don't really have much to say to that, but there are some people that really want it. So I think we still try to cater to them, but I don't find anything inherently wrong. Yeah, it's more like a preference, which is what this hobby is like really based off.
Okay, interesting. So talking about preferences, then what's your favorite keyboard to date? I mean, including or excluding the keyboards you carry, definitely lah. So any group buys, any hobby starters?
Can name more than one.
Yeah, of course. Oh, if you have a ranking, that'll be even better.
Maybe everything there on that show.
Maybe elaborate a few.
Okay, we have the Singer Kohaku and also the Singer Unicorn that I've wanted to get for a really long time. So finally I managed to get it. But now, I mean, there are still some boards like the Key Card that I'm still waiting for. I'm not too sure. Like every now and then I'll go and read about it, but don't really follow. But then there's also like TX. So we have TX boards like TX66, EO87 with the full clear acrylic with all the light bleeding through and stuff. Then we have the more refined ones like Geon's boards that we also carry, and also like every day you'll open your eyes and you'll see a new design that is interesting to you. So there are quite a few on the market also. So I can't say that I have a favorite board, but I have quite a few favorites.
I see. So in that sense, I guess you're a person that goes after the design first and then all things else.
It's a mix of both. Yeah. So
Okay. Okay. In terms of sound, then if we covered the design aspects, in terms of sound, where are you team talkie or team clacky?
Clacky.
Clacky.
Clacky. We are leaning closer to the clacky side, but I do enjoy like some deep clack. Yeah, if that's a way to put things.
I do expect anything less from a person who likes clicky. Yeah. So you will definitely prefer the higher pitch sounds.
A clean high pitch. But not too painful on the ears.
Okay. Okay. Then we talk about the best. How about the worst keyboard? The worst, absolute worst. Like once you lay the eyes on it, once you touched it, you think, wow, this keyboard shouldn't even exist.
Can we count using it?
Yeah, sure.
Cause I completely hate PCB issues. So we do face issues where PCBs don't work. So I find that like no matter how good the board is, if you can't use it, then it just doesn't make sense. Design wise, I would say, yeah, just boards that have that. Wait, I think there are some pre-built boards that do not support aftermarket accessories and parts. So that's also quite painful to use.
Okay, so you're talking about the PCB issues. What's the particular model or particular keyboard there?
Something that we don't carry anymore.
Okay. So I guess
Yeah. So we have to it's always the case where you stress test before you start to sell something, or you believe in it so much that you just carry it blindly. Then after that we'll face all the issues that come. Yeah, but we have to take it in our stride long.
we talk about keyboard clones a lot these days. So what's your take on it? In both, because personally I feel there's a distinction, right, between keyboard clones and let's say like keycap clones, because these are two separate categories and two separate products. So what's your take on each of them? Keyboard clone and also a keycap clone. As a both in a perspective of a vendor and also a perspective of a hobbyist.
Ideally, you won't want your products to be cloned. I mean, it just doesn't feel nice. But some people are harping on the fact that it's cheaper. So if budget is really a concern, then I mean that's one of the reasons to go into it. But if possible, then you'll definitely try to support the original. Yeah, which is what I usually feel. Yeah, I mean, definitely know about the Corco and the Unicorn. That's one of the main ones on the market. Yeah, I mean, Keycut was also copied, but not too intensively.
I guess you would suggest alternatives if people are looking for keycap clones lah, I guess.
Yeah, but I would say, I mean, I think this issue has been discussed before, especially in Mecca's video. Yeah, they made a whole video about it, explaining the differences between the build quality and stuff about the keycaps. But I would say, yeah, as they say also, which is just colors, unless you copy the novelties. Like colors, you can't copyright colors, but novelties, yes, because it's a whole design behind them. Which like together with the story or the inspiration behind the thing makes or breaks the whole keycap set.
Yeah, to share my own experience as well, when I first came into the hobby, then I didn't know where to look for all these accessories. I definitely didn't know about all the local vendors and local stores like yours or let's say Alum, so on and so forth. The only logical place to find budget things, Taobao. Yeah. So, and I didn't understand the terms. So on the listings, right, they would put when you translate it, it's like GMK inspired.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think for a very big time that was one of the issues, because people will say it's like GMK Striker, but it's actually not.
Yes.
Yeah, but then, I mean, very very long time ago when I first started, I also bought a Striker clone. But after that, you find that the colors are not that accurate compared to the original. But back then, I would say the main issue was because there was not enough availability. Like I missed the first round of goodbye, so like the in between period was so long. Yeah, like I was just dabbling in the hobby then.
Right.
Yeah, so I felt that was one of the pressures. But now I would say the JMK side, definitely we have more supply than demand. Loosely, that's based on what I'm seeing now.
Yeah, so back then, I think the common occurrence is that people are missing all the group buys, right? So they really wanted a certain GMK set, but then they couldn't get into a group buy. Then
Right.
they chose the route of going for clones. I mean, there are people who argue for and against. I mean,
Yes.
I'm same as you, I'm on the side of against. Like, if they
Yes.
miss the group buy, they should just wait for another round or find it
Yes.
on the aftermarket.
Unless you say like indefinitely, there will not be any more goodbyes after that. Then yeah.
Okay, so talking about group buys and the business side of things, so I guess there came a turning point where you decided, as a hobbyist, I want to take it into a business. So, can you describe that journey? How did you as a hobbyist wanted to become like a business owner?
It's more like we just wanted to try something for ourselves and see. And since we already have a sort of since we have something set up for Ktechs, then I was thinking why not we just push it a bit further and see how it goes. Yeah. Goodbye wise, I think we opened, like I got some help to open the website, and it wasn't too long ago. Yeah. I think maybe 1 to 2 years back at most. Yeah.
Then can you talk about maybe the challenges, like, because obviously I imagine to set up a business there has been many different hurdles and obstacles. What are the biggest challenges that you faced?
Nowadays, businesses are mostly online. So I would say that's the hardest part because there is so much to do, so many processes, so many photos to take, assets to prepare. And I would say getting through the administration is really one of the biggest hurdle. And you have to get acquainted with things like Google Analytics, Meta Suite, everything. Yeah. So it's like a lot of different layers to look through. Not to mention like to create a website, and let's say you want somebody to help with the coding also, because I totally can't read code. I only know how to use print to print something, that's all. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Then how about the more emotional side of the challenges? Maybe what did your friends or what did your family think about you? You know, starting. Maybe you were a boy at home, you know, just building keyboards. Then suddenly,
Yes.
I want to start a business.
Yes.
What did your social circle like say about this?
For starters, right, most of my friends are not that interested in this. Yeah, some people say I'm crazy. Then there are some people that said, you'll lose passion for the hobby. Then some people said like maybe you'll take up too much of your time. Yeah, so it's a lot of balancing and juggling.
Did it trouble you anyway? Did it become a burden or something? Because I mean, if let's say if I were to start a business from as a hobbyist, as you know, YouTube channel, then my wife, you know, or if you have a girlfriend, your girlfriend would like comment, oh, is this like a stable income? Then you kind of become like a point of argument and a point of contention. So
Yeah.
was there any part of that?
I mean, yeah, definitely there was, but it's always a concern also that is sitting on my mind, because the thing is that it's not in a case where you have to also consider the industry that we are in. So this is quite fast moving, and you have to constantly stay on top. So you'll just spend days like just sitting there looking through all the forums, talking to people, trying to get the latest information available. Yeah, it's not so much where you're in more of a stagnant industry where you can just operate towards your customers, provide services and stuff. So you have to see which type of business it is in. Yeah.
So I guess if you have a successful business, then the friends around you or the people around you wouldn't have that many comments. I guess they stem from a point of concern.
Yeah, care and concern more than anything else.
I know of people who were kind of depressed because their friends and even their close ones are like kind of like mocking them and say like, oh, you should find a stable job. You know, you don't do this kind of business. It's
But I mean,
unstable.
every day is just new challenges or not so much of like some 9 to like I'm not saying that 9 to 5 is not good, but I would say it's extremely stable, which gives you a lot of time to or more mental space to focus on other things that are more important. Yeah.
now that we have been on both sides of the fence, so what's different about being a hobbyist and what's different about running a business, a keyboard-centric business?
Hobbies wise, right, you are just enjoying the hobby. So it's more relaxed in the sense that if you want to look at it, you look at it. You don't want to look at it, it's fine. No one can always come back to it months later or see a board out there that's interesting. Then you're like, okay, let's go and have a look at it. But if you're running something, then it's a bit different in the sense that it's something you have to do every day. So you just sit there and just look through. Like it's a commitment, or I'll say it's your job now. Yeah, more than anything. But you also then there's always a blend of how to recommend products to people. Like everybody just messages you on the chat to ask you, so what do you recommend? So like there's always a mix in between me having to push something versus me recommending from the bottom of my heart. But the thing is, usually we try to find a balance, but I will try to make sure that you get what you want, which it will also be based on my opinion. So I try to ensure that you are happy with what you get. I think that's the main, like you will always want to walk away as a happy customer, not as a customer with your needs unfulfilled or your wants unfulfilled. Yeah, so we aim to give that to you.
So in that sense, you also mentioned that some of your friends would say that you may lose your love for the hobby if you take it to a business. So do you think any part of that is lost?
I mean, you do get questions in the morning, like 3 a.m., asking you what's the Tokyo Switch. So I guess that's that. But other than that, I would say it's still okay. I do get still do get very interested in new designs that come out. So there are some designs like some of my friends don't really like the back of the Cloud9, which is quite a recent board. But I would say the machining itself is very interesting. Like nobody has done that, or not that I know of that widely known compared to the Cloud9. So I think that was one of the like innovations like these are interesting. Yeah. So I also really like the raw finishes on stuff. So that was really interesting to me.
Talking about your experience then as a hobbyist, let's say 4 years ago, did you ever see yourself coming to a state where you are running your business?
No, but it's really like long time ago we started selling wireless mice.
Oh,
Those like $5 mice. So after that, then I was like looking on Shopee because I was trying to buy parts and I couldn't find anything. Yeah, so I was like, there was a very big loophole there. Then I was like, okay lor, let's try it.
okay. So is your store carrying any wireless mice these days?
Soon.
Oh, soon?
Soon. But it's not like those $5 mice that you get off Taobao or whatever.
Okay, obviously.
Yeah. So it'll be something different. So yeah, that would be another line of things that we are looking at.
In that aspect, to lead into our next question, then how do you decide what products you want to include into your lineup?
Group buys are group buys, I would say, but in stock is a completely different issue because you have to consider, like in the current market space where you move, especially you compare like Singapore versus local, Singapore versus overseas or international markets. So like Japan has a huge love for those hand wired keyboards. So if you sell pre-builds, I don't think it will work very well. But if you sell components to like what people are looking for, then that will probably be something that will move much better. Yeah. But Singapore wise, it's a mix. It's really a blend of like things. So some people come in looking for interesting boards or boards that look really, really nice, but still do not sacrifice much on the sound and the feel. And yeah. So for me, I aim to provide a bit of everything. Yeah, which is why across different layouts we do like try to carry one plastic, one metal, one on the more affordable range, one on the more premium range.
Okay.
Yeah, so you hit every part of the market.
Yeah, thinking back, I have a previous video that rather a community member asked me to help him build a keyboard that is fully hand wired. Oh, the experience is horrible. Where I have to solder almost 100 diodes. Yeah, but these days it's a lot better because the diodes are already on board. But soldering 100 diodes is another ballgame.
I mean, hot swap. Yeah, then it's hot swap versus Milmax versus solder. So there's a lot of argument that solder is better in terms of the sound, which is relatively true. Then there's the in between with Filmax. But for now I'm doing hot swap.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like a trade-off. But some boards like Unicorn, you have to solder.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to have Filmax because your switches will be popping out. Yeah.
Yeah, because as a content creator, it's definitely the hot swap route for me. Because otherwise,
Commitment issues.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
You change switches every now and then.
yeah, I will spend like hours trying to solder and desolder, and plus I don't have the people call it the bubble gun, the vacuum gun. That's
Yeah, we have a low unit now.
that's really expensive. That's really expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't want to buy it. So I borrowed it from someone. And it's like still sitting behind.
Okay. Coming back to having being a business owner, what would you say to someone who want to start a keyboard business in today's terms? So not 4 years ago when everything is booming. In today's terms, if someone would say, "Oh, can you give me advice because I want to become a new keyboard vendor or a new shop that carries keyboard products," what would you say to
I
them?
would say it's very much more saturated now.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have your bigger vendors definitely, but then there are people on Carousel which try to sell stuff. Yeah, but mostly what I see is that we are going very competitive on the prices, just to gain a few more cents, just to gain that one purchase or something that people look at. Yeah, which is not wrong also. Yeah, but I would say there are things that sell well, but they do generally fall out of favor. So you must always be very aware of what's happening.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. What's your if you can share, what's your average margin like across all types of boards?
Cannot share.
Cannot share.
Cannot share. But there are some products that we make like couple of cents only.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like maybe Gatron Yellows. There's no way like that switch is going for so low. And Gatron has maintained a very fairly fixed price. So it's like those few cents kind of thing. Yeah.
Interesting.
So please don't sell Gatron Yellows. it's like just so sad. Yeah. The market
Okay,
is
so whatever you do, just don't sell Gatron.
Yes. Those are the things
Okay.
you cannot sell.
I also noticed because I think we have also previously collaborated in terms of you sending switches over, especially the your DRAM switches. So what made you want to create your own line of products?
I think it was to want to create something for ourselves, like something that we can stand behind. I mean, that was the initial idea behind the switches, but the naming convention is damn stupid. Yeah, it's like S1 is switch 1, S2 is switch 2, then so on and so forth. But yeah, but I would say it's interesting to have something on your own that sells. But I do learn that there are some areas that I'm lacking in that we have to patch up. So currently we have some of the vendors helping me out with that, and yeah, very thankful for their help and support.
So it's more like a bucket list being checked off, rather than saying, "Oh, I want to maximize my profit by having." Okay.
Because at this day and age, or at this point in the hobby, making a board doesn't really give you that much of a profit. It's not something that you can live off on. I mean, unless you create a super high-end board that is very well received, and I mean, we do see like a lot of some boards that definitely like Geon's that is really interesting and has a very good backing behind it. Yeah, so that will really help. But then again, he has other projects or more important things that he has to do. Yeah, so this is also like maybe a sideline for him.
Okay. Then switching gears a little bit. Talking about let's talk about customers. Are there any good or bad customers that have come across, and can you share some experience with them? Any weird ones?
That cannot share.
Okay. I mean, they wouldn't know that you're talking about them, right?
Oh yeah, no idea.
Oh.
You might not know. There's no way you know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's not label it as bad. How about the weirder ones, or like the weirdest requests for?
Not really weird, but at times I do send things to customers. But nowadays we are doing recording, so we have to film the orders that we pack just to make sure things are right. But we fail, and they still come back and tell us that half the order is missing. Then like I don't know much about that lah, but we do keep all the footage here and there. So if really need be, then we'll pull it out. Yeah.
Okay.
But good customers, I mean, the vibe that we're trying to promote is more like community based. So you come in, just sit and hang out with other like-minded enthusiasts and like try switches and stuff. So I really like when customers are more like receptive to new ideas.
Right.
Yeah. So might not be something that you like, but over time you might go into it. You never know.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's more about trying to actually find out what your preference is. Which I feel what this hobby is about.
Okay. Yeah, I found it really interesting because I've been to your store or warehouse like 2 or 3 times.
The viewing gallery. Yeah.
Yeah, the viewing gallery. So two times there were people who came in wanting to buy a certain thing. Then after sitting down and trying, they suddenly, for example, if they wanted to buy $50 worth of things, then leave with $100 worth of things.
Yeah. I mean, I try not to push too many things, but if you're interested, then I guess there's nothing much you can do. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I guess that's one of the benefits of having a storefront now, like warehouse, where people can come and hang out and try.
For us, it's not so much of a storefront. It's more like somewhere where you can try stuff. Yeah. Then I've had people come in, tell me like, I don't have time today, so I only can sit down for 5 minutes, and I'll decide the switch by then.
I see.
So the guy ended up staying the whole afternoon. Then he came back the next weekend, and the whole afternoon again, just to figure out what switch he wanted.
Okay.
Yeah. So he was like just tapping non-stop.
Okay. Then you talk about switches, then how about the keyboards? What's the most popular keyboard to date that you have carried or sold?
I would say one of the more hyped ones is Rainy 75. Yeah, which did quite well. But then there's also the Kickstarter backing and a lot of marketing behind it.
Why do you think these boards are popular? Why?
I would say at the moment some people, which is not wrong, would prefer having a fully built experience. So just open the box, just take it out and use it. Yeah, which eliminates a lot of the trying to decide what is going on behind, what switch should I choose. Because like we have, I think, close to 100 variants of switches, so it might be quite daunting. That's why at times we also do encourage people to come down and try for themselves. So this way we can also help to eliminate things that you're not looking at, that you might not be interested in. Yeah.
Okay, so then in a sense, would you recommend the Rainy to someone who is buying a keyboard for the first time, or a custom keyboard for the first time, or would you recommend something else?
But then again, there are two sides of the hobby, which you could say the foam or no foam gang. Yeah, so the foam one is like fully foamed up, so it always brings the keyboard to a certain level, a certain baseline that is achievable. But then there are some designs like the Crush 65, some of the groupbuys that are run recently that do not carry any foam at all. So that will be usually towards the higher end side, where the designer is trying to show off like the sound design, how much clearance or spaces that he has built into the keyboard just to show off that sound profile.
Right, it's interesting you consider the inclusion or the usage of foams as a sound design, because I mean, in my opinion, I feel that foams are used to hide the flaws of the keyboard.
You can look at it in that sense also, but like sometimes I think nowadays we are more used to fuller sounds, which in the case like you have to put plate foam just to prevent that resonance and stuff. So we also do try with customers or let them bring their boards down so that they can test directly and find out what's best for them. Yeah, which nowadays there's a lot of foam going around. Yeah. I mean, it's nothing wrong. It's just preference.
Yeah. In the recent few videos or the few collaborations I've done, especially from Yunzi and Ipo Maker, they have very cool pre-builds that actually come with a lot of foams. Yeah. So in a sense, then if you are a strong advocate, I wouldn't say strong, maybe like an advocate of using foams in keyboards, would you then recommend pre-builds to new people? Or would you just rather say, let's...
For starters, yes. Because they're always looking at the lovely talky sound.
What's the caveat there? Why is the long yes?
Yes, I mean that's what usually most of the people are looking at. So which will arise from a combination of certain foams and sounds and features. But then again, you need a while to even find out what's the difference between switch, like the PCB foam. There are things like P. There's also things like Poron or EVA. So to know the sound difference, it definitely takes a while for you to get acquainted with that.
We will be right back with Ktechs. But before that, if you haven't already done so, please do hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. I have quite a number of videos lined up for you, so you will not want to miss those. Alright, let's get back to the conversation. Today, what would you, or how would you describe the scene of mechanical keyboards, especially in this hobby, and where do you think this hobby is heading towards?
For the moment, I think it's a race to the bottom, unless you can really distinguish yourself as something. So, to give context to that, every morning you open your eyes, you'll see a new switch on the market. At the moment, it's HMX or Nissan. Yeah, but keyboards wise, we are heavily moving into pre-builds also. Not so much of the bare bones experience, but I still think that the bare bones experience is like quite important, especially if you're moving up from pre-builds. And to have customizability options, that'd be really great. That's why I'm so interested in the Neo lineup as of now. Yeah, which is what we're offering on Groupbuy at the moment of this video. Yeah.
It's really interesting because in recent days, or rather the past few months, I watched Squash's video on Asus ROG Strix. Yeah, that one has like a 1000 hertz polling rate,
Yes.
which is kind of like on par with the custom mechanical keyboards, at least the really basic ones, like Keychron. Yeah, so it's really nice to see as a hobbyist to see the progress, because in the past, I think the previous that I saw back then, I think like 4 years back, the only customers I found was like EpoMaker, RK66 or something like that. Yeah, and the choices there were really, really limited and has very basic functionality. There's no QMK, there's no VIA at all. So then it became very hard to kind of customize things from there. But now you have the Asus ROG, you know, and more and more Keychron lineups. I think they are becoming there are more and more better pre-built options. You know?
But that being said, you have to see whether you're still looking to play around with it, or you are just going to look for just something straight out of the box and you don't want to touch it anymore. But then again, some things such as the ticking, the sound of the switch, you'll slowly creep out on you. So that's where you start looking for a second keyboard. And that's how I usually look at it. And it's usually the case for people looking at the first or second keyboards.
Okay.
Then after it will be like, wow, this looks nice, I'll probably buy it. Something like that. Yeah.
So is that still the spending habit of your customers, like from back then and now? Would they come back for recurring buys, or do you see like a new trend moving somewhere?
I think they will come back, but it's more of switches already, or accessories to build boards. Because as of the moment, we are still looking to increase the number and variety of boards that we carry. So I would say it's quite hard to hit the mark, especially for things like keycaps. It's really fully preference based. Like customers come and show me like different designs, and yeah, there's a pattern among some of them, which we'll look to source. But other than that, it's like really hard. Like you come in, would you spend something on like PVD fans on a regular? I don't think so. So it has to be something they really like before they buy it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. How about on the designer side of things? Like, do you see anything changing there, or are there any new tendencies that they have?
Some are slowly incorporating things like all the knobs and stuff, which will be the bigger brands. Not wrong. Definitely, it's not wrong as a business to give customers what they want. Yeah, because that's how you make money. That's how you make bank. Yeah, but other than that, there are always those designers that do more interesting stuff, such as sticking to their own design language. Yeah, there are some designers like Bo that kind of like make things, anything and everything that he wants, like which is interesting. And there are also quite a few other designers that I always look at, that yeah, some will follow their design language, some for every other board will come out with something new. Yeah, so it really just up to the individual.
Yeah, not to expose some of the few brands, but I feel that a few of the designers are actually just reusing their past designs. and then kind of regurgitating it. So I can't help but notice, or rather think that they are just trying to cash grab. Yeah, what do you think about that?
I don't think it's wrong, but it's so much so that you rely more on marketing for that or on the brand you have built. Yeah. But
Okay.
then there's also the issue of exclusivity. Yeah. If there isn't enough supply, there'll always be a very high demand. Yeah. But some of the things you only buy if you like it. Yeah, that's more prevalent for keyboards also. As it's not, yeah, you kind of need a keyboard, but do you really want a keyboard that fulfills this or looks like this certain way?
Right.
Yeah. So it's really up to you to decide.
Okay. Then one of the more interesting, I mean, if we are talking about the future of keyboards, or rather the direction it's headed in, one of the more noticeable trends is the rise of routing, or like those
Hall
Hall
effect.
effect. Yeah. So, and it's great that they are great quality, but you see it becoming like a mainstream thing, or is it just like a novelty feature?
I would say at the moment Hall effect is more built for gamers. So because there's the variable actuation, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so there's more and more support for it. So I would say that is something that's upcoming, and we always have to look for new things that are upcoming and try to onboard the bandwagon as well.
So would you be bringing some of these routing boards in?
I'm waiting waiting for response. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. So we'll see how it goes. But other than that, we are stocking up, and we are also we'll be able to provide things like the switches and also like accompanying phones and yeah, just all the components that you require. We also have alternative cases and such.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I would say Wooting 60 HE will probably be the more popular one now.
Right.
But they're also creating things such as the 87 and definitely more things to come. But I would say it's more interesting because they know that people are looking at alternative cases as well. So they're actually selling just the PCB kit. Yeah. So that is really them looking into the market and acting based on feedback. I would say now it's like everybody's trying to invent a new mounting style or like trying to throw as many mounting styles into it as possible.
Okay.
So like even when we are like slowly looking into making our own boards, but yeah, I mean it's the same thing. Like, do you want top mount? Do you want gasket mount? Like, do you want the sandwich mount? I mean, yeah, the sandwich. Then what kind of opening do you want? Screw release, ball catch. But then ball catch, there's also a lot of issues with ball catch. Yeah, like resonance and stuff. That's why they even made their own ball catch systems.
Yeah, and for ball catch, I've tried a few and they are hit and miss. One issue is resonance, then the other issue is in order to even get the ball catch out when you want to assemble it for the first time, some of the screws are tightened so much that you can't even pop the case out. Oh, that was a
No, I've held one before. So you're like holding the top case and then the bottom just drops out.
okay.
Yeah. So that one I think it's better than the entire thing falling apart.
Right. Because I was so afraid of like scratching parts of the case, and I was like really using all my force to wow.
Some of the samples had that issue, so like we'll receive samples of keyboards. Then I think initially all the way at the start we had ND75 with that, but then they fixed it in the production run. So yeah, it's basically acting on feedback.
One point I guess I just caught on is that I guess vendors do a separate layer of QC, because I mean as I would imagine, I mean from a perspective like vendors are just the middleman. Whatever products that they carry on a certain store page, then customers would buy them, and then that's it. But it seems that vendors would have another level of QC. For example, if the designer have to have finished manufacturing their products, then they ship it to you. Do you open the orders up and just double check all the cases, whether is it really A stock or B stock, or sounds like you do.
Some group buys. So what happens is nowadays it's more prevalent that the manufacturers will actually seal the keyboard in saran wrap. Yeah, basically, so when you open, there's a piece of wrap around it. So for those, we just visually inspect. But there are some where you have to look at it. Like yes, the Range 75 is very good, but then again, because of the price point, there are some things that we do not really look closely into, such as very, very small nicks on the case. So those we more or less have to open up and take a look at it. And we have to test some of the pre-builds, like some of the previews that we realize that have PCB issues. So more or less, we will open it up to actually just test it out as much as possible. Because I don't think it's a very nice experience that you open up a keyboard and certain parts are not working. Yes, we can call it down to change, and maybe at times you'll feel not too bad about it, but ideally out of the box it should be totally fully functional.
So then if a customer were to find some faults, then you will have to go direct to the vendor. Like, they don't go straight to the designer and say, hey, I want a replacement.
Yeah, but then again, it's a designer versus factory. Because some come out of the factory. Then if you want to claim warranty, good luck to you. Like it's not doable, but I would say it's a very long process.
Okay, so that means the warranty in that sense would, on a case-by-case basis, would lie either on the vendor side and also on the designer side.
Lucy, yes. Because at times we are able to get in things like replacement circuit boards and stuff that that can help you to solve your issue.
On the topic of group buys, then how do vendors actually negotiate with a designer and say, oh, I want to take on this group buy? Like, what goes on behind the scenes? Like, where do you even start? Let's say if someone wants to run a group buy for a community, do they just go straight to a designer and just...
At times it's that, but at times it's if you're looking for new projects that you don't know, then you have to be very active on forums, wherever that you can find people, or have your own contacts actually like look in. Because there are some instances where I'm not too aware of certain projects, but some of the vendors overseas that I know are kind enough to look me in. So yeah, you have to give credit to them for that. And yeah, because they also keep me in business. That's kind of how it is.
Okay, so I guess based on a little bit based on the connection to the designer themselves. Okay, and how about in other cases where perhaps you may not have that deep a connection? Do they just, like, what's the demarcating factor that lets a designer choose a certain vendor? Because I mean, in Singapore itself, there's like quite a number of people who can carry out group buys. Yeah, so perhaps what's the factor that would a design, I mean, that's if you know, because you're not a designer yourself.
I mean, I'm not. Like, I have so much trouble doing CAD. Like, I have no idea.
Right.
So I'm like just spending nights trying to figure out how the case works and stuff.
Yeah, so in a sense, then how does a designer choose a vendor? Like, if you know, or you have spoken to any designer.
Depends on how familiar they are with you. It's like, then also you have to look at things like, do they know my process well? How do you carry out group buys? How do you settle payment and stuff? Then, because some designers are also looking for feedback.
We talk about how a group buy started. Then what happens during the waiting time? Is it that the vendors just sit around and waiting and just wait for updates from the designer, or is there anything else that goes on?
Partially it's that, kind of. But then again, there'll be some where it's taking a bit too long. So we have to go and chase. So some of we have to ask for updates if we do not proactively receive them.
So what's your guideline for updates? Is it 1 month, 3 months, or
1 to 2 months? But usually, some of the designers that we work with have more projects down the pipeline. So we'll always end up like at the same time we talk about new stuff, we are still getting updates on what is happening right now with the older or the completed group buys.
In terms of group buys, then what's stopping vendors or from having these keyboards in stock as an in-stock option?
Capital is number one. Yeah, because if you are talking about group buy box, usually they are on the higher end of things. So if we are talking about Sing dollars, it's about, let's say, 800.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so it's about 800 to just keep one keyboard with me. But what are the chances that somebody comes in and buys it?
Right, that's true.
But in the context of Singapore wise, I would say shipping is another issue. Because shipments out of Singapore are not cheap. Yeah, and we do sell locally, we also do sell internationally. So international, but there's no way you'll pay like, I mean, unless you really want a board, there's no way you'll pay like $100 to $200 just for me to ship the board to you. Yeah, but then the thing is, we try to negotiate the rates down, but it's not really helping.
So I guess for brands like say Keychron, perhaps their margin is really huge. That means the cost of their of their keyboards are cheaper? Would you say that?
Not really, but I would say then will be economies of scale, in which they produce such a large number that it just makes sense for them to do it. Yeah.
So it boils back to the fact that they have more capital, then they can buy in larger volumes, lah, I guess.
Yes, but it's like something like let's say you're doing an injection molded keyboard or injection molded case.
Right.
So what happens is the cost as you use the mold, you're just making the cost per unit go down.
Right.
Yeah, or like fabricating PCBs, you're just making the same thing over and over again. Yeah. Then again, you need to have a delivery network where you can just move your inventory well. But in the case of group buys, it's more specialized. So you have to find your own market and find your own niche for it, compared to mass market items.
The idea of having an in-stock Geon F1 80 something is too far off, lah, I guess.
No, we'll have it.
Oh, as in like always in stock, not just
Not always.
Okay.
Not always.
Okay.
Can't
Yeah, that's why I thought.
Yeah, you cannot expect John to make so many
Right.
like have it sitting in his factory and stuff. I mean, I think he can afford that, but it's not very feasible if you're looking strictly from a business perspective. Yeah.
Okay. Any group buys that really stood out to you for good and bad reasons?
Good. There's always hype. Like, let's say the ARC60. That was one of the projects that we are the only vendor aside from Ktechs, which is one of the US vendors to carry it. Yeah, so that worked out really well, but I would say international clients were not able to purchase. Yeah, because that was the shipping was a very big issue.
Right.
Yeah, but other than that, locally it did quite well.
How about the bad ones?
That one, I mean, some we didn't move much. Yeah,
okay.
I would, if you consider that bad, then yeah, maybe there wasn't enough marketing, or like because we only brought it in, we are the only other vendor from other than maybe let's say China that has it in stock, or we actually ran the group buy, but there wasn't enough marketing around it. Yeah, which is why I feel marketing is one of the very important parts nowadays to run an online business. Yeah, more so to also get new customers and stuff.
Yeah, I have my own share of bad group buys, especially for designers. If I buy direct from them, one that especially come to mind is Cheru Design. Yeah, the one that he just closed down for no apparent reason. You know, like it's quite depressing because he has a very good track record from previous bots. Then he screwed up big time on one of the group buys, and he couldn't kind of refund on mass. Then it kind of he went down lah, you know.
Because what happens is they will get a quotation from the manufacturer. So this will include the minimum order of units that need to be made. So if you are unable to fulfill that quantity, then you end up having to pay a lot more, which is not feasible at all. Yeah, but other than that, that's why at times you have vendors basically to eat that quantity for you to make sure it happens.
Okay.
Yeah, which is what some of them are doing lah.
So vendors are like a marketing channel, you say?
Kind of. Yeah, depend on their. It also depends on vendors.
It was so terrible because I got the notification from DHL that the parcel is in Singapore, but they had to undergo some tax thing that basically they messed up the communication. So the parcel was actually in Singapore. I was tracking the order, and it got redirected back. Then I never see the bot ever again. Yeah, so in a sense, then the designer just ran off. Then there's not even a vendor to even
answer for that lah.
Yeah. So that was really bad in a sense. Then, I mean, in certain cases like this, I guess a vendor would then come in very handy lah. There was a really interesting group buy. I think it was Salmon Cat Studios. I forgot the exact board. I even forgot the name. So what happened was the factory sent direct to me. Yeah, not even going through the designer.
Correct.
Yeah, so I guess the factory got the different customers' details and yeah.
Yes, which is why at times, if there's a company running a group buy, we will end up paying the company the full fee. Then they will split up the designer's amount and the amount to pay the factory.
I see.
But there's also a case where we have to pay separately. But I mean, it's a little bit more service charge, I guess.
So the case of the factories sending boards or products direct to customer is
relatively
low.
low. Yeah, relatively low. It doesn't happen that often,
Mm-hmm.
unless you're really looking at very specific designs
Right.
or design houses. Yeah.
Right. Speaking of group buys, you cannot avoid the topic of the other vendors like globally that is closing down.
Mm.
Like, what do you think about the whole fiasco? Like, yeah, what's your general thoughts about it?
It might be mismanagement of cash, which usually pops out as a first answer to that, because I think there were quite a few videos covering it, some by Teha, some others. So basically, if you're running like 30 group buys at the same time, unless your cash management is very good,
Right.
and you actually keep track of your cash flow, then there will always come a case where you are just rolling off your money. So whatever comes in, the revenue from the next group buy is used to fulfill.
Right.
Yeah, or you're using your cash for projects that don't go very well, which probably will add up to your losses.
I guess that's a case of the business scaling up too quickly lah, then to maintain the headcount and everything. So then cash flow became an issue. Then
Correct.
that's where the all snowball comes
Correct.
in. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, what do you think about the measures that maybe Teha have already recommended in terms of the vendor rating system?
The vendor rating system is not bad, but there are definitely some areas that you cannot cover. Like let's say if I'm just running it alone, I'm just one person, so that gives me a lower rating. But it's not wrong, because to a certain extent, let's say we're just one day I don't feel well, and then I cannot fulfill orders already.
Right.
Yeah, which is not too wrong, but there are always workarounds for that. Yeah, but then again, if the system is as what it is, then you can just leave it.
Okay. So what then do you think can be improved from the current suggestion of the vendor rating?
I think it's more in depth, but it's you have to really review it case by case basis, and for that to happen, you have to understand the business. But then again, there are so many vendors around.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think it's a bit hard to cover all those like nook and cranny that that there are always those special cases. Yeah, but there are too many special cases really. Yeah, so I would say generalizing it is not a wrong move.
So we are almost nearing the end. I actually posted that I'm, or rather not that I'm going to interview, but rather like what would some of the members of my audience would like to ask. So one question, or rather, it's a pretty lengthy question by I'm on my 116. I don't know what the meaning of that,
Okay.
but anyway, so he asked, what are the greatest opportunities for growth in the hobby, and what markets do you see underserved? How can we ensure both designers and vendors operate with transparency and recover integrity? So we start with the first part. What are the greatest opportunities for growth in the hobby?
Areas that are not touched into
What are the underserved markets that you see?
product wise.
I mean anything you can think of.
I think we are really leaning into 1800s. I mean that's one of the areas that
Okay.
I feel are lacking. So for us, we bring in a lot of 1800s to counter that. So we have previews, we have bare bones as well. But yeah, cause like I myself, I need number pad. So I actually, two of my favorite layouts are 75% and 1800s. So I have a very soft spot for 1800. So like even now when I try to design or commission a friend to design for me, 1800 is what I'm looking at. Yeah, so you have to like really sit and think what area is like market lacking. But then again, it's always a risk because you're just buying based on your feel.
Right.
So what if it doesn't work out? Then
Okay.
you don't really have an workaround for that. Then you have to think how to clear my stock, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Then the next part, how can we ensure both designers and vendors operate with transparency and recover integrity?
Transparency wise, it's more like, it's a bit more like trust me bro, but
Okay.
not really, because to a certain extent there's an available amount of information that I can give you, but then again I have to weigh the other factors, such as, so if I tell you that I'm expecting shipment this week, you'll expect maybe delivery next week, but what if there's a delay?
Okay.
So on my end, I have to buffer a little bit, maybe give it 1 to 2 weeks more. But generally, there are always those customers that are very understanding. So very thankful for that. But there are those that are very demanding, which expect the unit next day or that kind of thing. So the buffers are actually meant to make up for it. So I would say it's easier to under promise and over deliver than the other way around. So me quoting, like there are some projects already happening that actually got delayed from the factory. So because the production capacity cannot match what the demand is. Yeah. So there are situations like that that we always face on like daily basis.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that's the end of our quick chat. So that camera can promote your store. What's your latest news? What's going on?
Latest news. I would say that now we are trying to plan quite a few things. So hopefully everything comes together and we have quite a few projects lined up. So I mean our switches is just a start. Like S1, S2, S3, which each hits the market in their own way. Then we have a lot more projects like I cannot say like oncoming, but we are also looking to make our own boards, but definitely we're commissioning some of our good friends to design them. Yeah.
Okay.
So they are helping us with that, and we hope to be able to fulfill that not too late. Yeah.
Okay, nice. Okay. Thank you very much for the interview.
You're most welcome.
Yeah, I think that's it.